Exposed, the incredible love story of a billionaire and the female builder who hiddenly transforms Philadelphia. Sarah tightened her grip on the blueprints, her heart racing as she faced the local community council. The room buzzed with disbelief, whispers sweeping through the crowd like an angry wind. She felt the weight of their skepticism heavy on her shoulders. "I want to turn these abandoned buildings into affordable housing for families in need," she declared, her voice steady but trembling inside. Every pair of eyes she encountered felt like a challenge, questioning her every intention. A builder? No, a woman builder trying to change an entire neighborhood. They weren't ready for her. But as Sarah spoke, something drew her in an unexpected gaze from a shadowed figure at the back. It was Jake. She caught him staring, his posture still and formal, a man draped in anonymity. But there was something different about him, an intensity in his eyes that made her feel as if she'd stumbled upon a hidden world, one she didn't belong to. She quickly shook off the distraction and continued her pitch, pouring her heart into every single word. Yet Red gnawed at her the notion that her qualifications meant little in an industry dominated by men. Would they ever see her vision? Days blurred into nights as she battled endless obstacles, permits, funding, and herself. Just as she was on the brink of compromising her principles, Sarah found herself sitting across from Jake in a cozy cafe. There, amid warm scents and gentle music, a connection sparked. She reveled in the way he listened, how his eyes lit up at her passion. Was it real? Or was this billionaire just another face behind a facade of philanthropy, offering empty promises? That nagging voice whispered doubts in her mind, the questions wrapping around her like a vice. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just when Sarah allowed herself to savor their moments together, tension surged. Jake's hints about funding grew more pronounced, but so did her anxiety. "What do you need from me?" she had asked one day, trying to see past the layers of charm. His pauses haunted her, revealing a storm brewing beneath his polite demeanor. Each time he spoke of financial backing, the words seemed to come with strings entwined in the very corporate culture she despised. Would she trade her integrity for the resources she desperately needed? The revelation hit her like a freight train. Whispers of Jake's family legacy, rooted in exploitation, lingered in the air like acrid smoke. She felt trapped, her heart caught between burgeoning feelings and her duty to her community. How could she trust him when his past cast a long shadow over their future? Every day, she wrestled with her choices, losing herself in the conflict between ambition and ethics. The stakes rose higher with each meeting. As she stood at her construction site, the dilapidated buildings now awash with potential curious eyes surrounded her, waiting for a decision she wasn't ready to confront. Then a local news outlet published an article detailing their relationship, igniting outrage and doubt. Holding the paper that questioned her integrity, Sarah's breath hitched as she spotted Jake approaching, his expression a mixture of determination and worry. Her heart raced, uncertainty pulsating through her veins, while her mind screamed, "What does it truly mean to stand for what you believe?" As he stepped closer, the looming choice felt heavier. The tension was unbearable, and suspense hung thick in the air, leaving readers begging to discover how love and ambition would either unite them or tear them apart amidst the chaos. Sarah's breath came in quick bursts as she processed the headlines splashed across the local newspaper. "Billionaire's secret relationship with builder sparks controversy." The buzz of passing traffic faded, overtaken by the pounding in her ears. She clenched the paper tightly, wrinkles forming under her fingertips, as Jake stepped closer. His brow was furrowed, mirroring the anxiety that twisted within her. "What are we going to do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper but charged with urgency. The warmth she once derived from his presence now felt suffocating. The gravity of the situation pressed down on her like a siege, and the familiar lure of his charismatic smile now seemed tainted by doubt. "This isn't just about us anymore," she snapped, caught between fury and fear. "I wanted to change things for this community, and now they're questioning my motives because of you." Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and betrayal, the essence of a struggle laid bare in that one outburst. She had come so far, risking everything, only to find herself depicted as a corporate pawn. Jake's expression softened but still bore the weight of responsibility. "I understand how this looks, but it doesn't have to be the end. We can turn this into an opportunity." He paused, searching her eyes as though he could read the tempest swirling within. Maybe we can work together to prove you're in this for the right reasons. The idea seeped into Sarah's mind like ink spreading across paper, a mix of intrigue and trepidation. Wasn't that a bit like the old strategies? Dismissing the very fabric of a vision for a mere setup. Yet, there was something undeniable about Jake's determination. Perhaps this needed to be redefined. Prove it. She echoed, her heart racing ahead of her thoughts. Was it worth the risk? What do you have in mind? His gaze hardened and his tone shifted to a compelling insistence. We appeal to the community directly. Arrange a town hall that highlights not just your work but also our partnership. We open the floor for discussions, and you can present your vision unfiltered, no strings attached. Each word resonated, a bold plan shimmering amid the fog of uncertainty. Your family's legacy is complicating everything. She shot back, wrestling with the sense of betrayal but also the fragrant hope that dared to blossom. Why should I trust you in front of them? Because I have something to gain here too, he countered. I need the same support you do. Ownership demands responsibility. I want to be a part of this project not just financially, but emotionally and ethically. His sincerity seemed to shimmer like sunlight breaking through clouds. With each response, Sarah's resolve cracked slightly. His family's history loomed as a barrier, yet a sliver of something more profound pulsed between them, a possibility. Still, the workspace dwindled around them, echoing the urgency of time. As she glanced at the abandoned buildings looming behind her, a heady mix of fear and determination surged. What would it mean to lay herself bare in front of the very community she aimed to uplift, especially now, amidst scandal? Every heartbeat throbbed with an internal struggle, oscillating between vulnerability and strength. Taking a deep breath, Sarah steeled herself. If we're doing this, I need full transparency. I can't afford to compromise our mission or my beliefs. The stakes were elevated now. This wasn't merely business anymore. It was her life intertwined with her principles. Then we do it together, Jake said, his eyes intense but earnest. We set up the meeting by the end of the week. Pushing past foundational doubts, a flicker of hope ignited within Sarah. They had the potential to redefine their narrative, to not just be another headline, but to craft a story solid enough for the community to trust. But would it suffice to stand against the tide of skepticism? Just then, she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye. A familiar figure watched from a distance, someone who would become a direct adversary in her quest to reclaim her name. A confrontation was imminent, and she felt the stakes elevate once more. As Sarah's resolve intensified, she realized she stood on the brink of a revelation, aware that one misstep could either ruin them or solidify their path forward. Would she stay true to her values while navigating Jake's entangled past? The answers loomed, just within reach, but so did further threats on the horizon. The days leading up to the town hall were a whirlwind of mixed emotions and frantic preparations. Sarah felt a weight of purpose, punctuated by the ever-present doubt of whether this gamble with Jake would justify the turmoil it brought into her life. Every moment spent strategizing was met with a corresponding revelation about her own motivations, the interplay of her determination intertwined with newfound insecurities. Her mind raced as she pored over her presentation notes, meticulously crafting a vision for the community. How could she bridge the gap between her aspirations and the cloud of suspicion now surrounding her? It felt as if she was navigating through a fog, disoriented but unwilling to retreat. The stakes stirred a deep introspection. Why had she ever wanted to transform the community? Was it a noble quest for justice, or did the thrill of the power it could yield tempt her into a morally gray space? One afternoon, tucked away in a cluttered office, Sarah caught herself staring blankly at the page. She had made countless plans before, but this felt different, intensely personal. It wasn't just a project. It was a life entangled in a web of alliances that seemed ever fragile. The voice in her head grew louder, echoing her fears back at her. What if all you achieved is lost in one miscalculation? Jake's calls had become a steady rhythm against the chaos, grounding her yet amplifying her inner battle. His plans took shape more confidently than her own. We need to own this narrative, he urged during one of their meetings, enthusiasm radiating from him, the very embodiment of hope. You have always wanted a voice, Sarah. This is your chance to embody that vision. But fear churned in her stomach as she absorbed his words. Was she merely stepping onto a stage while he directed from the shadows? Yet, some part of her stubborn fragment compelled her forward. She couldn't shake the nascent sense of personal empowerment rising within, urging her not to back down. It was during one of those sleepless nights, reliving every pathway she forged for herself, that she recognized her growing capabilities. The apprehensions that once paralyzed her began to morph into a potent source of strength. She had forged this project from the ground up, fought against naysayers, confronted stereotypes, and stood resilient against challenges. Slowly, she unearthed an unexpected resolve. Her journey wasn't just about the community's perception or reconciling with Jake's legacy, it was about her own tenacity and her right to lead. As the day of the town hall approached, she dealt with her inner demons, confronting what lay ahead. It became clear that she needed to redefine her relationship with both Jake and the unfolding narrative. If she was going to expose herself, her motives, her flaws, then she had to march into that room not only as a collaborator with Jake but as a leader in her own right. The afternoon light cast elongated shadows as she rehearsed her speech one last time. Sarah could feel the weight of anticipation coiling in her stomach, the community awaiting her words, hungering for authenticity. She envisioned their faces: skepticism, anticipation, perhaps even hostility. Just then, a sharp knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. It was Jake, with urgency lacing his features. "Sarah, we need to talk. You won't believe who showed up at the office today." Something inside her tightened, a premonition of the stakes rising higher. What had surfaced, and how would it challenge everything she had prepared for? As dread mingled with determination, Sarah took a steadying breath, knowing that the confrontation looming before her could shatter the fragile peace she had fought to build. Tomorrow would require not just a vision but an unshakable courage, one capable of facing whatever new obstacle awaited unbeknownst to her. Would she remain unyielding in the face of revelations, or would the facade of control slip once more? The answer loomed, restless, just out of reach. Sarah's heart raced as Jake stepped inside her office, urgency clear in his eyes. That familiar tension gripped her, rising like a tide determined to drown her out. "Who was it?" she demanded, the sharpness in her voice belied by the tremor in her hands. "It's not just a casual visit, it's the last person you'd expect to see here." "Raymond," Jake replied, closing the door behind him, as if to create a barrier against the news he carried. The name landed heavily among her thoughts. Raymond had been a figure of authority in the community, a traditionalist with deep-seated views, often dismissing the very changes Sarah aspired to implement. Reeling momentarily, Sarah questioned the odds of this meeting. Was Raymond there to sway the townspeople against her? Or sought to negotiate her ambitions out of existence? It wasn't just a social call. "He came with a proposal," Jake continued, his brows furrowing as he spoke. "He wants to collaborate, to use your vision, but on his terms." Dismay washed over Sarah, a tidal wave crashing against the shore of her resolve. In that instant, every self-doubt she had battled burrowed its way back into her psyche. Was this what it meant to want true change? To have her ambitions co-opted by someone who believed he had the right to dictate the course of her endeavor? "Collaborate?" she scoffed, though the uncertainty lingered in her tone. "Jake, you know his track record. A collaboration with Raymond equates to surrendering my vision." Jake took a step forward, grounding her in the present. "We need to think strategically. If we can make his proposal work for us, it might preserve your standing in the community, keep the momentum going." Momentum. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. "This isn't just about holding on, it's about standing firm in what I believe. I refuse to let someone else shape the narrative I fought so hard to own. If he thinks I'll give in, he has another thing coming." As Sarah spoke, a thread of conviction began knotting through her words, tightening around her resolve. She couldn't afford to cower in the shadow of Raymond's influence. If she wanted to wield power, she had to embrace it fully, and stop letting external forces dictate her choices. Yet as her heart pulsed with determination, another thought flickered. What did that determination cost her? Collaboration, even forced, could protect her from backlash. "I won't be manipulated, Jake," she declared, her eyes narrowing. "But what other options do we have? What if I reach out to him, but on my terms?" Jake regarded her carefully, a glimmer of admiration replacing the tension. "That's the spirit. Show him you're unyielding. But you need to prepare yourself, he won't back down." Quietly, a plan began to form in her mind, new contingencies branching like roots searching for sustenance. Sarah thought of the speech she labored over, words meant to resonate deeply, not merely to charm. Doubt wrestled with the burgeoning confidence that had taken root during her sleepless nights. A confrontation with Raymond wouldn't just test her leadership, it would force her to confront her own motivations with clarity she had thus far avoided. As the lingering tension morphed into purpose, Sarah began to realize this could be her moment to assert her identity not just as a collaborator, but as a leader equipped to face even the toughest adversary. This was more than a duel of words, it was a defining chapter of her self-discovery. With each passing minute, the enormity of what lay ahead solidified in her mind. She envisioned standing before Raymond, challenging his assumptions about her capabilities and resilience. But would her words carry the weight she envisioned? The clock seemed to quicken, pushing her toward the inevitable confrontation with the man who had become a symbol of resistance. Could she rally her strength, or would fear once again anchor her in place? What awaited her was cloaked in uncertainty, but one thing was clear: the next meeting would be about much more than compromising ideals. It would reveal whether Sarah was truly the architect of her own destiny. The time had come to face Raymond, and in the depths of her heart, a whisper echoed, this was not just for her vision, but for her very self. The hours leading up to the meeting passed in a blur, each tick of the clock dragging her deeper into contemplation. Sarah could feel the weight of expectations bearing down on her shoulders, a tension that was both intoxicating and suffocating. She perched at her desk, surrounded by the remnants of her plans, charts, proposals, and a myriad of ideas, each one a testament to the passion and labor she had invested in her vision. But now, they felt like just pieces of her past, overshadowed by Raymond's looming presence. Before the confrontation, she knew she needed to confront the fragmented pieces of herself that had been too easily fragmented by self-doubt. She started pacing the confines of her office, drawing strength from the physicality of her movements. Every step became a mantra of resolve, each stride forward breathing life into her growing confidence. She had sacrificed too much to let this man dictate the narrative. This was her moment, and it was time for actions to match intentions. As she prepared her notes, Sarah reflected on her journey thus far. The certainty she once had in her convictions had been shaken, stripped away by years of navigating the male-dominated world of leadership. With each experience, she had steeled herself against disappointment while learning to find strength in vulnerability. Yet faced with Raymond's proposal, a question rose from the depths: was she strong enough to maintain her vision? Unscathed, glimpses of her past flickered through her mind: how she had been underestimated, how her ideas were often dismissed in favor of more traditional approaches. With each memory, a fire ignited within her, her determination reshaping itself into something fiercer. The vision she claimed was not merely an aspiration, it was a declaration of her identity. Her thoughts drifted to her father, the man whose quiet strength had shaped her resolve. He had taught her that true leadership was not about imposing authority but forging connections, even with those who challenged you. This meeting with Raymond was not about losing herself, it was an opportunity to assert her power, to reclaim not only her narrative but her very self. With an awakening clarity, Sarah began to strategize. She would not seek collaboration in a desperate bid for acceptance, nor would she present vulnerability as an invitation to trample over her hopes. She decided to dig into what made her unique, amplify her vision, articulate her ideas with unwavering conviction, and showcase the progress she had already nurtured. As the time drew near, Sarah's heart thrummed with anticipation. The upcoming meeting wouldn't just put her vision on display, it would reveal to her the depth of her capability to contend with an opposing force. The physical manifestations of her ideas, blueprints and designs became symbols of her commitment. These were her tools, weapons in her arsenal against the traditionalism that Raymond represented. However, amid her preparation, a flicker of uncertainty crept back in. What if she failed? What if she blinked first when confronted with his formidable presence? This was the abyss of self-doubt she had long fought to escape. Yet, she took a deep breath, anchoring herself in the present moment. The amalgamation of fear and hope was exhilarating, pushing her forward. I am more than a vision, I am the reality of change, she murmured to herself, the words crystallizing into a solid affirmation. Finally, with a renewed sense of focus, she straightened her shoulders, gripping a handful of the proposals. The time had come for Sarah to redefine the circumstances in which she found herself. The meeting with Raymond could become a lesson in personal empowerment rather than subjugation. As she stepped out of the confines of her office, she resolved not only to hold her ground but to value the journey she had taken to arrive at this moment. The choice was clear, and she was ready to confront the dualities within her, the advocate for her vision and the challenger of established norms. As she walked toward the conference room, a voice echoed in the back of her mind, reminding her that true leadership was often born out of the very conflict she feared. Would she emerge with her vision intact, or would she find herself entangled in a struggle that threatened her principles? With one last breath, she braced herself. The path ahead loomed wide open, the stakes raised well beyond her expectations, and a singular thought pierced through her apprehension. This time, I will define the terms. The conference room felt sterile, the air thick with an unspoken tension as Sarah entered. The long table was strewn with documents, the cacophony of voices momentarily quieting as her presence changed the dynamic. Raymond's gaze met hers with a mix of curiosity and challenge. She felt a rush of adrenaline igniting her resolve, carrying the weight of her aspirations like armor. She took her seat at the head of the table, her posture upright, her breath steady. The time for retreating into insecurity was gone. No more wandering thoughts, this was a moment of self-actualization. As she glanced down at her notes, everything that had felt daunting faded into clarity. Each bullet point was a stepping stone, an opportunity to articulate her vision clearly. Thank you all for gathering today, she began, her voice steady and resonant. I know you have questions, concerns. An assertive glance at Raymond suggested she was prepared for resistance. I'm here to demonstrate that my project's impact is undeniable and its potential far-reaching. She initiated her presentation, unveiling the blueprints and projections that illustrated her vision. The figures danced before them as she spoke about innovation, sustainability, and the disruptive nature of her plans within the industry. As the technical jargon flowed from her lips, she noticed the shifting expressions of her audience, some intrigued, others skeptical. Yet, she pressed on, buoyed by the growing conviction within her. Midway through her presentation, Raymond interjected. What about the risks, Sarah? You're proposing a major shift without considering market viability. His tone was deliberately condescending, a calculated jab meant to destabilize her confidence. Her heart rate quickened, but she countered swiftly, armed with data that highlighted her projections against industry standards. Every venture carries risks, Raymond. What defines success is how we mitigate them. I've accounted for these variables in my projections. Easier said than done, he replied, leaning back, crossing his arms, casting shadows of doubt over her presentation. This confrontation was more than professional, it was a battle for her credibility. She could feel the room split, some leaning with silent support for her, while others seemed to rally with Raymond. An internal voice crept in, questioning her worthiness, prompting the old familiar fear that gnawed at her self-esteem. Yet, looking at the blueprints in front of her, images of hopes materialized, drowned out those doubts. With renewed vigor, she pivoted the conversation, challenging Raymond on his own track record. What I want to know, Raymond, is how your vision has evolved in the face of challenges. Are you willing to adapt, or do you believe the way we've always done things is sufficient? Stunned silence ensued, and she relished the moment, realizing that she had flipped the narrative. This was not merely a defense of a proposal but a stance on the broader question of leadership. Would they continue to falter behind outdated views or leap forward into uncharted territory? As the tension escalated, she saw glimpses of respect from her colleagues, a flicker of recognition for her strength. Yet, she also sensed Raymond's irritation boiling beneath the surface. He would not concede easily. With the meeting dragging on, she deftly navigated new questions, molding perceived challenges into opportunities. Each answer spun a web of understanding, portraying her not just as a dreamer but a strategist. The learning curve was steep, yet she engaged with it organically, uncovering insights that fortified her stance. As discussions became heated, Sarah felt an exhilarating thrill. Her growing confidence acted as a catalyst, energizing her presence in the room. In this moment, she understood, personal development often materialized through conflict. The friction was necessary, it ignited truths and revealed hidden capabilities. With minutes left, an unexpected thought hatched inside her. I invite each of you to reimagine what success looks like alongside these challenges. The industry is evolving, and so must we. An openness flickered in her peers' eyes. But just as she sensed a shift in momentum, Raymond's voice cut through again, insistently dismissive. And what if you fail? What if this vision of yours crumbles? Her composure wavered for a split second, yet she regained balance. Then we learn. We regroup. Because building something worthwhile means taking risks, and it's never about simply avoiding failure. The echo of her own words resonated deep within her, bringing a clarity she had sought for so long. This conversation was transformative, not just for her proposal but for her very approach to leadership and vulnerability. As the meeting wrapped up, Sarah sensed the lingering tension amidst cautious approval from the group. It was an unspoken yet palpable acknowledgement that she had risen against doubt, but the question lingered like a whisper, stoking uncertainty in her gut. Would she be able to hold her ground when Raymond undoubtedly retaliated against this newfound purpose? The uncertainty hung between them like a taut wire. Would the confrontation continue, paving the way for a revelation, or would her closest ally succumb to betrayal? Sarah stepped out of the room, a question looming larger than ever in her mind: could she truly withstand the weight of this new power she had begun to wield? Her footsteps echoed through the corridor as Sarah exited the conference room, a rush of mixed emotions coursing through her. Adrenaline still surged, pushing her to confront the reality she had begun to reshape. She had emerged stronger, but the uncertainties weren't gone. The fallout of her encounter with Raymond loomed large on the horizon. Bracing herself against the cold, sterile walls, she reflected on the power dynamics that had played out in the meeting. She found herself grappling with the complex nature of leadership. Was it enough to have a vision, or did she need to actively maneuver through the minefield of doubt, especially from someone as influential as Raymond? The undercurrents of their discussion kept replaying in her mind, refining her understanding of resistance. She reached for her phone, tapping through her messages. A notification caught her eye, a reminder for a one-on-one meeting with her mentor, Ben. The thought of discussing recent developments with him ignited a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Ben's words had often provided her with clarity, yet she wondered if she was ready to unpack everything that had transpired. As she headed to Ben's office, she found herself studying her reflection in the glass doors. The woman staring back looked different, determined but slightly frayed at the edges, the mask of confidence just barely holding. She inhaled deeply, reminding herself that vulnerability was a part of growth, not a weakness. Entering Ben's office, she was greeted by a warm smile that immediately put her at ease. The room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and old books, her favorite combination. "You look like you've been through the fire," he remarked, sensing the tension that still clung to her. "More like out of the frying pan," she replied, taking a seat across from him. Ben leaned back, folding his hands thoughtfully. "I heard the presentation went well. But your body language tells a different story. What is on your mind?" Sarah hesitated, contemplating how much to share. But she knew hiding behind a facade wouldn't serve her. It was intense. "Raymond challenged almost every point I made. For a moment, I felt like I was losing control of the room." "Did you?" he asked, his gaze penetrating. "No," she admitted slowly, "but it felt close. I surprised myself, holding my ground and even flipping the script on him. But now I'm left wondering what happens next." He won't let this slide quietly. "Sarah, the willingness to challenge and be challenged is what distinguishes leaders from followers. What did you learn about yourself during that confrontation?" His question made her reflect. "I realized that I'm capable of more than I thought. I can advocate for my ideas, even when challenged. But with power comes the fear of making mistakes." Ben nodded, leaning forward, his eyes focused. "Fear is a part of the process. The real test is whether you let it paralyze you or propel you forward. Remember, growth often comes from discomfort. What if you reflected on how failure could inform your next steps, rather than viewing it as a stop sign?" Her thoughts spiraled into the realm of possibilities. What if I position myself as someone who learns from failure rather than someone who fears it? That could shift the narrative not just for me, but for the whole team. "Exactly," he exclaimed, enthusiasm radiating from him. "Every project has its ebbs and flows. Having these conversations shows your commitment to growth, but it also demonstrates to your colleagues that risk-taking is a necessary part of innovation." As she absorbed his insights, a flicker of excitement ignited an opportunity branch sprouting from the shadows of doubt. Could she leverage this experience to not only redefine her role but also to inspire the team? "Thank you, Ben," she said, her voice steadied with newfound resolve. "I'll take that to heart." As they wrapped up the meeting, Ben offered a final thought. "Stay attuned to your instincts, they won't lead you astray. And remember, the next confrontation might be the opening for you to create real change." Leaving his office, Sarah felt buoyed by the exchange, visions of a transformative approach dawning within her mind. But even in her exhilaration, the specter of Raymond loomed, a reminder that the real moment of truth was still to come. How would she prepare for the inevitable confrontation, and would she dare to not only challenge him but also redefine their very relationship? The anticipation of that interaction both terrified and thrilled her, deepening her resolve to embrace this journey ahead. The real question rattled underneath her calm: what price was she willing to pay to claim a space in this evolving narrative? As the days slipped by, the anticipation of her next encounter with Raymond weighed heavily on Sarah. Each morning greeted her with a mix of determination and dread, sending her mind racing with possible scenarios. Every corner of the office felt charged with unspoken tension, her colleagues' casual conversations a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. She could feel their expectations, a silent chorus urging her to confront the looming challenge. She often found herself at her desk, photos of past team meetings flickering across her computer screen, moments of unity and success that now felt like distant memories. These earlier victories seemed to shimmer in her mind. Could they serve as the foundation for what was to come? Did she possess the tools needed to redefine her position, not merely as a participant in meetings, but as a figure of authority? She reminded herself that her recent successes were no flukes, they were hard-earned through grit and a willingness to confront doubt. In quiet moments, she reflected on Ben's advice about reframing failure. Could her next confrontation with Raymond become a catalyst for transformation rather than a battleground of egos? A thought sparked, what if she didn't just defend her ideas but also invited him into a dialogue? That could dismantle the power play, turning it into a collaborative opportunity, but doubt crept in like a persistent fog. What if Raymond perceived her strategy as weakness? The lurking fear of dismissal or ridicule gnawed at her. Yet beneath that fear was an equally vibrant thread of resolve. She refused to allow the specter of uncertainty to dictate her actions. With a deep breath, Sarah jotted down her thoughts, planning the approach she intended to take. Clarity began to form in her mind. She could present her ideas firmly while acknowledging the value of Raymond's perspective. What if she framed the interaction not as an adversary duel, but as a cooperative quest for the best outcome? A thoughtful dialogue could shift the dynamics, illustrating her willingness to engage rather than withdraw. She prepared her notes intently, the act of writing bolstering her confidence. Each line she drafted felt like a step onto solid ground, reinforcing her capability. She spent hours compiling fact-based evidence to support her proposals, ensuring her arguments were not only passionate but also grounded in data. A new vision emerged. She imagined walking into the conference room, shoulders squared, presenting her thoughts with an open heart and an open mind. Sarah envisioned challenging Raymond's thoughts while inviting him to dissect her ideas together. The possibility of turning confrontation into collaboration energized her spirit. As the meeting day approached, she practiced her delivery, the words sculpting meaning out of abstract fears. She rehearsed not only her arguments but also anticipatory responses, preparing herself for any pushback. The more she practiced, the more adept she became at visualizing the exchange. Each iteration left her invigorated, transforming anxiety into a strategic pursuit of effectiveness. Then, 2 days before the meeting, a sudden message disrupted her routine. Raymond's office requested a preliminary chat. Her heart raced. Was this the moment he intended to address their previous clash? She gathered her notes, her resolve crystallizing. This could be her moment to set the tone. The hour before their talk, Sarah perched at the edge of her seat, a mix of eagerness and apprehension, knowing that a shift was imminent. Would she be able to convey her vision powerfully enough to bridge the divide? Could she rise above the situation, turning it into a learning opportunity for both of them? When the time finally came, she took a deep breath as she entered his office, prepared to rewrite her relationship with the man who had both challenged and inspired her. The door closed behind her, sealing off the outside world, intensifying the atmosphere with a palpable tension. This was it. The moment she had been preparing for. Would she indeed manage to unlock a respectful partnership, rather than remain a pawn in his game? The answer lingered, just out of reach. Sarah stepped into Raymond's office, her heart pounding in rhythm with her thoughts. The air felt laden with unspoken history and the weight of expectations. She surveyed the spacious room adorned with minimalist decor, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within her. Raymond stood behind his desk, arms crossed, a familiar expression that hinted at skepticism mixed with curiosity. "Thanks for coming in, Sarah," Raymond began, his tone measured, eyes scanning her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "I've reviewed some of your proposals, and I think we need to talk." The weight of his words settled on her like a heavy cloak. This was the pivotal point she had anticipated, where the dynamic could either shift or solidify into further conflict. Her mind raced through her carefully rehearsed points, yet a nagging voice reminded her to breathe, to engage. "Absolutely," she replied, pulling her shoulders back. "I believe we can find common ground on where we want to take our project." An eyebrow arched in response. "Common ground. Let us see if we can make that happen." The initial back and forth cut like a knife, but Sarah stood firm, her resolve bolstered by the energy of her preparations. She presented her revisions with confidence, recounting the data and evidence she had meticulously assembled, but she also paused to invite Raymond into the conversation. "What do you think of this angle, Raymond?" she asked. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. His expression softened for the briefest moment before he quickly masked it. I still don't think you're seeing the bigger picture. The stab of criticism struck her, igniting a familiar urge to retreat. Instead, she pushed back, cultivating her inner strength. I understand your perspective and I appreciate that. However, consider the potential impact of incorporating these elements. Forced to confront the rising tide of conflict, she clearly articulated her vision and the reasoning behind it, exposing her vulnerabilities but framing them as opportunities for improvement. The conversation shifted, evolving from mere opposition to a more nuanced exchange. Raymond's challenges didn't dissolve, but they transformed into probing questions rather than outright dismissal. Their discourse twisted and turned, sparking fierce debate, yet with each volley, Sarah found herself more emboldened. You have a strong point, she acknowledged at one juncture, but what if we flipped it around? I think this could lead to a more productive outcome for everyone involved. Unexpectedly, she saw the flicker of acknowledgement in his gaze. It was as if he recognized the strength in her invitation rather than just her opposition. Soon, they found themselves working through potential solutions together, Raymond outlining his concerns while Sarah built on them, innovating rather than merely defending. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah felt exhausted yet triumphantly alive. She had navigated the rocky terrain of conflict and emerged holding on to her convictions while engaging a formidable opponent. They hadn't come to a final agreement, but there was a newfound respect. It was the first step toward the collaboration she sought. As she left his office, exhilaration surged through her. She realized that the path to success was not just about asserting a position but also about opening doors for dialogue. However, a new challenge loomed over her. A significant meeting with the larger team was slated for tomorrow, where she would have to defend her proposals. What strategies would she employ to ensure she didn't lose the ground she gained? The foundational work she had undertaken felt precarious as doubts lingered in the back of her mind, setting the stage for an arduous battle ahead. Would she be able to carry this momentum forward, or would she stumble when faced with the collective scrutiny of the entire team? As Sarah prepared for the next day's crucial meeting, determination coursed through her veins. She had just experienced a breakthrough with Raymond, a pivotal moment where she held her ground and asserted her vision, but now she needed to translate that energy into a broader context. The stakes felt higher than ever. This wasn't just about her, it was about the entire company, the community's future, and her journey into leadership. Sitting at her desk, Sarah meticulously reviewed her presentation, analyzing her points with renewed clarity. Her experience with Raymond had illuminated an unexpected truth: conflict could be a transformative force rather than a hindrance. She couldn't erase the skepticism surrounding her, but she could use it to fuel her argument. If she demonstrated resilience while embracing constructive criticism, she could reshape doubts into power. Walking to the conference room, she felt the familiar weight of anticipation settle on her chest. The gathered team awaited her, a mix of scrutinizing eyes and curious expressions. Each colleague had their reservations, and echoing whispers of uncertainty reminded her of past doubts. Yet, she squared her shoulders, stepping forward with resolve. Thank you for being here today, Sarah began, her voice steady as she commanded their attention. I believe we can make an impact through this project, and I am eager to share the progress we've made. She launched into her presentation with passionate assurance, intertwining her vision with data that painted a vivid picture of future community benefits. Her blueprints and graphs, once merely documents, had transformed into the backbone of her conviction. As she spoke, Sarah noticed subtle nods within the room, expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. They were engaged. It was exhilarating, and their interest fortified her growing confidence. Moments of doubt still brushed against her thoughts, but she skillfully pushed them aside, focusing instead on the collective energy that buzzed in the room. Halfway through her presentation, a familiar face interrupted a colleague who had typically challenged her viewpoints, often veering towards dismissal. Sarah, it sounds ambitious, but you can't deny the risks. What evidence can you substantiate regarding community engagement? Leaning into the moment, rather than crumbling under perceived hostility, Sarah paused. Thank you for that question. Engaging with the community is fundamental to our success. In fact, we've already begun outreach with local organizations to gauge interest and gather input. She articulated how her previous experiences equipped her to navigate such risks, showcasing her adaptability and foresight. As the presentation continued, she elucidated the details of her collaboration with Jake, and how they intended to forge genuine connections with stakeholders. Each response dynamically reshaped the narrative, opening dialogues rather than shutting doors. Sarah skillfully highlighted her past challenges, framing failures as lessons learned, emphasizing that fear of failure should never stifle ambition. "What you're proposing is pushing the envelope," a supportive colleague interjected, "but I want to know how we position ourselves if the project falters. How do we recover?" Her response flowed effortlessly. "Recovery is part of innovation. I aim to create safeguards, flexibility and adaptation will be part of our strategy. Our commitment to learn together will define our success." With each answer, she felt the room lean into her perspective, curiosity peeking through barriers they once built against her. By the end of the meeting, as she summarized her vision, a wave of affirmation washed over her. The applause that followed wasn't just a testament to her project, it represented her transformation. Sarah had not only navigated her vision with clarity, but she had moved through conflict with poise, asserting herself as an essential leader. In the days that followed, immense change rippled through the team. The dynamic shifted as her colleagues rallied around her. They began to see Sarah not only as a builder but as a strategist, someone capable of melding ideas into action. Recognition grew, her name becoming synonymous with integrity and innovation. It was during a subsequent project briefing that Sarah received formal recognition from the executive board, a commendation for her tenacity, transparency, and successful navigation of stakeholder relationships. Standing at the podium, her speech framed the entire journey. "I wanted to prove that ambition and ethics could coexist, that authenticity could forge new paths even in the face of adversity. This recognition isn't just mine, it belongs to everyone who believed in this vision." As she stepped back, the applause echoed, the sound filled with not just admiration, but also respect. Sarah realized she had not only succeeded but transformed. She had stood firm against challenges, forged partnerships, and demonstrated tangible results, the very heart of true leadership. As she left the meeting, pride enveloped her spirit, a solid confidence born from hard work and resilience. No longer defined by her challenges, Sarah had established herself not as a builder bound by skepticism, but as a leader rewriting narratives and crafting futures. The journey was hers to own, thriving in the very essence of what it meant to empower others while remaining true to herself. Now, as she looked out at the projects on the horizon, Sarah knew the real triumph was the clarity she had achieved in her vision and her ability to inspire those around her. She was no longer just a builder, she was a change maker, the architect of her own destiny. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending, your insights are invaluable. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.